Super Mario 64, otherwise known as the first 3D game ever made. My source? Just trust me, bro. Believe it or not, there are people out in the world that don't ascribe to this being the greatest piece of media of all time. Other than having bad taste, they say stuff like, the camera is old and dated. Well, I guess you can't argue against it being old, though just because it's not as buttery smooth as some modern day cams doesn't mean it's not functional. It certainly has that laying the groundwork for the future twang to it. I won't take that away from you cynical critics out there. However, I've come to appreciate it even outside of a respect your elders standpoint. The manual puts this sentiment into words rather nicely. One of the tricks to this game is to use the camera skillfully. You are not just the player, but the cinematographer too. What an oddly artsy phrase. Now, you could see this as a sort of failsafe to evade complaints about the camera if it were truly awful, like it's bad because you're bad, haha. Yet, on a serious note, I find that quote holds a lot of weight due to the tools given that makes for a surprisingly robust system, keeping in mind its creation date. This comes in the form of 3 distinct modes you can switch between that alters the camera's main functionality that in turn can totally change your perspective. The main normal mode is operated by the Lakitu bros. Yeah, the entire time you're playing Mario 64, you're actually seeing everything through a literal camera. Well, at least speaking in universe, of course. Creative genius aside, as the Lakitu told you in the beginning, he'll always capture the recommended angle. This seemingly vague statement translates to the game by default, trying to frame the world around you in the most dynamic way possible, while still being able to intake crucial information from your surroundings, all with respect to easing Mario's maneuverability. Wow, quite the mouthful, right? Well, for more practical hands-on demonstration, welcome to my Let's Play through the beginning of Whomp's Fortress. As Mario moves along the stage, I want you to take notes on how the camera positions itself in a variety of ways to keep the gameplay trucking along smoothly without the need of any player adjustments.
Let's go.
Making our way onto the main lower path, the camera's straight shot starts to tilt ever so slightly at a bit of an angle to provide a much appreciated view of the upcoming line of receding platforms. Right afterwards, we need to move upwards in the same direction we originated from, so the camera quickly whips around, allowing us to climb up these steep stairs, although still settling on an angled shot to better convey the depth of the structure. Once we've reached the top, the camera moves back to a straight shot and stays put even while Mario makes a sharp left turn, almost reverting to a 2D plane of sorts. But as we'll immediately see, this is to our benefit, since keeping this framing while going across the breakaway bridge, we're able to judge the upcoming obstacles to maintain a steady flow of movement. This whole sequence really gives off a sort of cinematic feel alongside aiding us in this new third dimension. Nice. Although, at times, this strong push for the suggested angle can be at odds with how you personally want to view the world, perhaps causing the infamous camera buzz that can lead to some understandable frustration. Fear not, to get a little more unrestricted, hit the R button to swap into Mario mode. You're now placed into an up-close, near-ground level shot right behind Mario, almost as if you're seeing the world from his perspective, albeit still from the third person. If this is too personal for your taste, you are able to zoom out for a bigger picture with both cams usually still retaining their main attributes. While in Mario mode, the camera becomes hypersensitive, responding to every change his forward-facing position makes, allowing for a constantly updated look into what's directly in front of you, removing the, what feels like at times, invisible camera walls blocking its movement. I find it useful for swimming, flying, and just generally when you want to run along relatively straight instead of at an angle with the control stick. Sometimes this freedom does come at the price of looking at some rather unappealing early N64 landscapes, as if the devs were trying to mask up the game's beautiful polygons. So, I guess props to Lakitu for staying true to his word. It feels natural that this is the alternate camera mode and not the other way around, as solely relying on the Mario cam can reap its own set of issues, such as with it not reacting as smoothly to much needed perspective changes in some peculiar parts of levels. But I think that's kinda the point. Utilizing both cameras at their most opportune time is sort of a skill set you need to fully make use of the overall system. I know saying the camera has a learning curve is probably not going to go over well with the general modern audience that uses an actual stick for their camera movement, yet I genuinely do wonder how many people who sling out insults about 64's camera, warranted or not, have never tried to use the Mario cam in sections where it may have provided useful.
Takumi, I hope they fired your ass. No pension.
Anywho, it doesn't matter because the devs had 20/20 vision, seeing right through all you babies, and included a third mode stopping the camera in place so that it doesn't require any management work whatsoever. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, I don't blame you. Accessing this secondary alternate mode is a bit cumbersome, as you already have to be inside of a main course and be completely stationary for it to appear in the pause menu. Now, it's not some sort of super hidden detail found 20 years after the game came out, but personally speaking, I had no idea this option existed until I was randomly goofing off one day. As the name may suggest, activating this mode freezes the camera in place at its most recent angle, with a little bit of wiggle room to try and still focus on Mario the best it can. Okay, before you shout, why the heck would you ever use this? There are some niche applications like being able to go into the first person and maintain that specific framing when you exit. Word to the wise, this is a little less effective while shooting out of a cannon. Now, with all that being said, I must ask, why the heck would you ever use this? It's so bizarre that this is a real in-game option that's available, because as you can imagine, with the N64's not so advanced draw distance capabilities, Mario quickly becomes a mere speck at best after briefly running from the camera. It feels like I'm using some sort of out-of-bounds hack every time I switch to it. I mean, what other game in existence lets you have this much control over the camera? I'm not complaining though. This mode can cause some seriously funny jank if you keep poking around in it, leading to some rather unsettling shots of Mario. For real, next time you boot it up, go and play around with this and see what kind of silly hijinks you can muster up. Any game that gives you stuff to goof off with like this is a 10 out of 10 in my book. At the end of the day, in the year 2023, is Mario 64's camera outdated? I mean, obviously, sure it is. Not every instance is as buttery smooth as my Womp's Fortress example. There are still clear signs of improvement needed, which, to be fair, did happen pretty quickly on the same console looking at a game like Banjo-Tooie. That camera is super slick, combining the different modes from Mario into a single seamless experience. Don't get it twisted, this wasn't some sort of defense on Mario 64's camera. And while I don't think it's nearly as bad as certain people say, if you are one of those people, I'ma just hit you with the GameStop quote, more power to you, man. Sure, it laid the groundwork and was monumental for gaming and all that boring jazz. But, above all else, I love this camera for making me step back and realize that in this virtual world, I'm not just the player, but the cinematographer too. Oh yeah, there's one last thing I wanted to bring up that didn't really fit in with the rest of the video. Pausing. Pretty boring, right? I mean, why the heck wouldn't it be? You're literally putting a stop to the game. In most cases, a small menu pops up or something similar, but keeping in line with Mario 64's artsy-fartsy cinema feel, pausing in any relatively large open space will yank the camera back for a scenic wide shot of your surroundings. The best part? There's not a single set in stone angle for every stage. Instead, responding specifically to wherever you're at when you pause. On the right side of Peach's castle, I get this, and all the way on the other side by the waterfall, I get this. Pretty neat, don't you think? Alright, well, that's all, folks.